first panel. I absolutely love moderating panels, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation. In this panel, we're wanting to get to the core of what does it really mean to support learning, to support learners through their learning journey. What does it really mean to transition children from their ABCs to their CEOs, to being CEOs? And I've got 4 incredible panelists that are going to join me on stage. I'm joined by Itaki Nitechenze. She's the Director of External Affairs for Vodacom South Africa and the chairperson of the Vodacom Foundation. Taki, are you with us? Let's give her a round of applause as she comes up. Joining Taki is Khanyisa Diamond. Khanyisa is the head of Systems Capacity and Advisory at the National Education Collaboration Trust, or more commonly known as the NECT. And previously to the NECT, I believe Khanyisa was looking after all CSI activities for Old Mutual and the Old Mutual Foundation. Let's give Khanyisa a big round of applause as she comes up. Thank you. And I love that in this conversation, we also have practitioners in the form of Principal Chauke, that's Principal Kazimula Chauke from Dr. W.F. Nkomo Secondary School in Atteridgeville. Let's invite and give a round of applause for Kazimula, please. I'm going to just grab my devices so we can create a seat here. And last but certainly not least, in this panel discussion, we're joined by Sibongile Khumalo, Executive Director of the Learning Trust. The Learning Trust is an intermediary donor and capacity development organization that specializes in the after-school sector. So let's give Sibongile a round of applause as well. I'm going to move all my devices, and I'm going to, as I put my devices down, allow me again to extend a special invitation to all of you online and in person. In the flow of the conversation, if you can begin sharing some of your questions with me, what I'll try to do is integrate your voice into the conversation as early as I can. So we're not going to have a conversation for 55 minutes and then try to squeeze 5 minutes of Q&A at the end. If you can send me your questions, I will put aside my questions and I'll bring your questions to the fore and put them to the panel. In addition to this, before we start, I want to just quickly bring your attention to a poll that we've just loaded, and we're going to get to the results of the poll at the end of this particular conversation. And the poll builds beautifully on what Professor Metcalf was asking of us. The question is, which stage of the education life cycle should companies prioritize through their CSI initiative? Is it early childhood development? Is it primary school? Is it secondary school? Is it technical and vocational education? Is it higher education? Or is it the full life cycle? And so what I'll do is that at the end of our panel discussion, we'll come back to see what the poll results of that look like. But I do encourage you to please participate. Taki, it's great to see you again. Let me put this question that allows us just to get context of Vodacom's posture and participation in learning journeys. How has Vodacom helped to strengthen the education ecosystem? Because this is what we heard Sito speaking about, emphasis on the ecosystem. And how have you done this through your core business as well as through CSI? And as I give you the opportunity just to share some of these opening thoughts, can you also just comment on what have the benefits been to the group? Bonang talks about, doing good means doing well. What does that look like in the context of Vodacom?
Thank you very much. So the Vodacom Foundation is the CSI arm of Vodacom, and therefore we benefit from the technological innovations of the company. So in 2018, we decided to introduce an education ecosystem which is anchored around what we call the Vodacom Schools of Excellence. And here the focus is mainly on the comprehensive approach to education, where attention is not just on the learners, but it is also on the teachers, it is on infrastructure, it is on e-content, it is on ICT support, and also mental wellness. And interestingly, we did not thumbsuck these elements. They actually come from government's vision of education 2030, which shows that our government actually had a comprehensive view to education. Why this is not happening in quintile 1, 2, and 3 schools, we do not know. But that is how we come in. So we've got 25 schools of excellence, and we are scaling them on an annual basis at the rate of about 1.6 million rands per annum per school. And each school of excellence is closer to, I've just learned the correct terminology from Professor. Each school is closer to an early childhood center, not an ECD center. Yes. And what we do, we have adopted these centers and we remodel them to be child-friendly. We put a computer lab with tablets and grade R content, but we also provide ICT coordinators who assist the children and the owners of the center or the caregivers with digital literacy. But most importantly, where there are pit latrines, we demolish them. And it is for the dignity of the children and their caregivers. And then each school is also closer to a community development center. They're called teacher centers, where we've got a computer laboratory, and the Department of Basic Education uses those facilities to train the teachers on pedagogy. We are not specialists on pedagogy, and we make sure that we do the maintenance on a regular basis. And of course, then we go into the schools, primary schools and secondary schools. We are given these schools by the Department of Basic Education. They are part of our bigger number of 2,500 schools. And there, apart from having a computer laboratory and an IT division that we have provided, we have also now reinforced the computer laboratory because of vandalism. But the most important value-added service that we are providing now is dealing with mental wellness. We've got psychosocial support experts. We've got psychologists and social workers that work with the teachers and the learners in the communities. And I'm sure the principal here will speak about it because we support one of his schools. And of course, lastly, we've got a virtual classroom. This is something that evolved during COVID. When most learners, especially from quintile 1, 2, and 3, were not able to access education because they did not have the relevant facilities. So we now have a broadcasting solution where children and the teachers can actually be able to access education from anywhere.
So before I move on from you very quickly, Taki, I mean, as you've been speaking, I've been saying plus, so learners plus teachers plus infrastructure plus mental wellness plus coordinators, and the list is quite extensive. What was the rationale on focusing on the ecosystem and the breadth of issues that you're taking on in schools, compared to saying we're just going to focus on one particular pillar or one particular focus area? Why go broad instead of going, and I won't say deep because you could be going deep in those broad areas, but going instead of a singular focus?
It's simple. It's about achieving better educational outcomes. And not doing it alone, but doing it with partners. So basically what we did an audit of our footprint. Looking at the equipment that we've provided in the schools. And we also now do monitoring and evaluation to measure impact. So traditionally, we used to just provide connectivity in schools, a router, a SIM, and devices. But over time, we realized that that was not sufficient. It was not impactful. It was about numbers. We'll be counting. We've connected so much number of schools in a year. But then when you go back, you find that the devices have grown legs and there is no accountability. Nobody tells you what happened with those devices. Are the teachers and the principals and the learners even using those devices or the equipment effectively? In some schools, actually, these equipment were actually sitting in the principal's storeroom because nobody knew how to use it. So we introduced this comprehensive approach to ensure that there is better educational outcome, but there is digital literacy.
And I think, Professor Metcalf, you're going to love hearing that storyline because we're hearing the evolution of the approach, because what you measure and what you count is actually what you value. And that sounds absolutely incredible. And of course, I haven't missed the point on the importance of partnership that you've highlighted for us. So, Principal Chauke, ladies and gentlemen, I don't often get to live the dream of putting principals on the spot. So I'm really going to relish this one. And you look like a very strict principal, and I almost want to say sir, to make sure I'm in your good books. But let me ask the question in this way. We've heard a lot from Taki in terms of what Vodacom does. I want to flip the question to you and say, firstly, what is the support you're getting for your school from Vodacom? But more importantly, what is the impact of that on improved learning outcomes? Because that's what we're trying to measure, and that's what we're trying to count ultimately.
Thank you. Let me start by saying that we feel so proud to be one amongst many to be picked by Vodacom just to come in and support us as a school. We are in a township with little resources, and coming in, Vodacom helped us to move a little step further. One, it is not impossible but rare for a township school to have connectivity. And through Vodacom we have connectivity. The entire school, our learners can connect from whatever end in the school through the partnership that we have with Vodacom. Vodacom was able to provide our educators with tablets. So all my educators have access to, not tablet per se, a laptop, which we appreciate. And all my grade 12 learners have their own tablets. And you have then laptops that are used by all other grades as and when they visit the ICT center, which was revamped by our partners, Vodacom. Now, in the ICT center, we do a number of things there. But let me just mention what we're getting so far, and then we'll get back to that. We are benefiting in terms of, we just introduced robotics through Vodacom. We're benefiting in that regard. We're benefiting in terms of psychosocial support.
Yeah.
We have got social workers, psychologists stationed at a school in a township. You don't normally have such. So we have them, they work at our school full time. If you go there today and there are challenges that need their support, you simply go there to them. What school normally do, you will have what we call school support-based team, which is made up of teachers who are actually supposed to be in classes. When learners have problems and challenges, they need to be directed to such team. So they need to make time. They will either lose time with learners in class to deal with such problems.
Yeah.
But the presence of the psychosocial support team has somehow taken off that load from the educators. Yes, they don't leave out the responsibility of identifying, because as and when you go to class, you identify problems and so on. Learners will still also approach you. But then they now have somebody that they can channel those particular challenges to, and they know learners will find assistance. And this support does not only end within the school, because as and when they engage with learners, they then discover the root cause is actually not from school. It comes from outside. Yeah. So it extends to families. So they are based in school, but somehow families are actually benefiting from that. And the good thing about it is also we partnered with other schools around us to say these learners that we have as a school are friends with other learners from different schools. So if the challenges that we're facing are dealt with only within our unit and other schools are not supported, they go out to the same groups, and we might be fighting a losing battle. So our team then came up with a program to say, on regular basis, we'll visit these other schools and offer same support, so that as they come out after school, they then support each other from different angles. unlike one school getting help, assisted, and others are not finding assistance. And they will be overwhelmed by this majority of learners who does not get help. So I think that, for me, it was a bonus to say, let's involve others. But the virtual classroom, for me, it was a bomb.
Tell us about the bomb.
Yeah, you know, it's a, you'll find yourself, educators are human beings. They are not robots. They can be sick.
Yeah.
So this is how it works for us. If one educator is not in and I can't get an assistant teacher to take care of a particular class, because of the virtual class, one educator is able to take care of 2 classes at a go.
Yeah.
What happens is, because of the gadgets that we have, this one class will then be provided with gadgets, and one educator will be teaching in an ICT center where we have everything that will be projected. So the teacher will be in an ICT center teaching maybe 1 or 2 classes or more at the same time.
Yeah.
Which for me, it helps a lot, because you won't find a situation where learners are left behind because of the absence of an educator. Now and then they are engaged. That for me, it's something
the
else.
bomb.
It's something else.
No, I
Yeah.
absolutely love it. Principal Chauke. And I think some of the things that you've shared that I think so powerful is the connection to other schools in the community that you speak about. You talk about the rarity of having connection, but also, more importantly, the gift of what's happened on the back of that. Robotics, as an example, the extension of support into families, which is so powerful. So, very briefly, in 30 seconds, I'm going to ask you, so what? That is the question. So what? After all is said and done, with all of the support, have you seen a shift in learning outcomes?
Yes. Definitely, the availability of these resources and learners having access to extra resources that supports education, that supports teaching and learning, it actually helps them in terms of quality of results. Performance changes, there's improvement in performance. In the past, we did not do well, but since the coming of Vodacom, we keep on improving. We're not 100% there, but resources being there, they are helping us to get to areas, to sections that learners could not access. There are platforms. GDE is busy with streaming some lessons and all those things.
Yeah.
Through the resources that we have, a child is able to connect from home. There are lessons that are taking place throughout. So they don't have to stay at school forever. They take the gadget with them home. They can revise from home. They can connect for free. Why not pass?
Why not pass? Ladies and gentlemen, imagine if we were able to ask that question across the country. Let me go to Kanyisa. And let me bring the question, Kanyisa, because if we listen to part of what Professor Metcalf has shared, part of what Taki has shared as well, the challenge here is systemic change, systemic interventions. Knowing the work of the NECT, what would you say has proven to be most effective? What really leads to some systemic change? And what is the role of companies in bringing about systemic change?
Thank you, Nozi. So the ones that I've seen which seem to work and will lead to systemic change, and I think I want to just quote what Prof said. She said that with your programs, you must locate responsibility where it must be maintained.
Yes.
In order to sustain.
Yes.
Your answer is right there. Because there's value in working with schools. We want those children, particularly in areas that are under-resourced, to feel that they are part of the ecosystem as well, so that they can aspire and be motivated. But we can't leave it there. We have to look at the entire ecosystem. Schools are under the Department of Basic Education, both from a national level, and then we've got provinces, and then we have districts. The question is, your project, when you are no longer sustaining it and you're no longer there, who's going to maintain it and take it forward and replicate it to the rest of the 25,000 schools that the system has to provision education for. And that's where we need to think about how do we make sure that teacher development that we are doing at school level is trickling down to subject advisors, is trickling down to how to maintain continuous development when the funder is not longer there, who will then be taken over by the districts, for example. We need to think about, is there a policy environment that's existing to incubate these activities that you want the school to take forward? And if that is not existing, a subject advisor who comes and looks at how education is being provisioned in the school, and it falls outside of the systems that they need to look at whether it's happening or not, over a period of time, it's going to lose traction. So it's very important to ensure that what is the environment in which this project has to exist? To what extent is there capacity within the system, looking at the entire ecosystem at national level, at provincial level, and then at district level as well, so that they can take it forward. And also looking at, apart from replicability, there's an issue of resourcing.
Yeah.
So when you are no longer funding it, can government afford to take things forward? So always design the programs with that question as well, because an issue of affordability sometimes can be the reason why government cannot take things forward, because they have to think about 25,000 schools at the end of the day.
So what I'm hearing you say is that even at the design stage, we've got to be designing for sustainability, and we've got to be thinking about the environment that will sustain that piece of work beyond the funders' participation. But Kanyisa, before you go, one of the things that keeps bubbling to the surface is this idea of partnerships. I hear Taki speaking about it. I hear Principal Chauke speaking about it. Professor spoke about it. And I think we can talk about partnerships and collaboration, and it all sounds really nice. So let me ask the question I'm learning from Prof. Metcalf now about how to ask hard things in a really nice voice. What are the 3 ingredients that, in the absence of those ingredients, that partnership's not going to work? Especially if we're looking at making systemic change in education. 3 things that have got to be in the pot, or we might as well all pack up and go home.
I think the first thing is to first differentiate between partnership and collaboration, because they are completely 2 different things. A partnership is often tied into legal contracts, whereas collaboration, which works better for development, those who come together will have to first have a common vision, right? Not a multiplicity of visions and interests. What is the common vision that you are working toward? And secondly, co-creation. Every partner in that collaboration must be part and parcel of the decision making, including co-creating. So each person comes in with different expertise, with different lessons picked up in different projects that they've done prior. So they have a contribution to input into the collaboration and the design of the programs. And I think lastly, we have to learn from each other. A robust monitoring and evaluation of that program at the end of the day, so that we can take the lessons forward. And the 4th one, you have to make sure in the collaboration, government is in it. If government is outside and you then bring them this baked cake at the end of the project, it's going to be difficult to assimilate and integrate it.
Common vision, co-creation, a robust monitoring and evaluation framework and process so we can learn from each other, but also make sure that government is part of the process right from the get-go, is what I'm hearing you say. So let me then jump to Sibongile. Sibongile, the Learning Trust really focuses on supporting the after-school sector in South Africa, not often spoken about. So maybe just talk to us a little bit about why the after-school sector in particular, why is this important, and how does it fit into the broader ecosystem? And as part of that question, maybe also speak about what makes for an effective after-school intervention.
Thanks so much, Nozipo. So the after-school sector is made up of all these community-based organizations that are providing essentially extended learning programs to children in their neighborhoods. And the Learning Trust supports those organizations, both with funding and with organizational development so that they can become more effective and sustainable. And these after-school programs essentially offer a socialization, I would say, service first and foremost to children. So this is where kids learn critical life skills. We often talk about 21st century skills like collaboration, like creativity, leadership, problem solving, and many of those skills are learned in the after-school setting. But also after-school programs provide a safe environment for supervised learning. I think we all know that teachers are overwhelmed and parents are involved in work and all sorts of things during the day. And kids need supervision after 2 p.m. especially. And most after-school programs intervene in those hours, when the bell rings after 2 p.m. And so it's also about providing a safe space for kids to learn. But I think thirdly, what's most critical about them is that they offer academic support.
Right.
So whether it is a space where kids can do homework or work on their projects, or where they can be helped to prepare for tests or exams. And in fact, the trends in maths and science study, which has been conducted in South Africa since 1995, consistently speaks about kids and the majority of learners actually in the system who access what they call shadow education, which really speaks to these after-school programs. So you and I may have maybe engaged in Tswana traditional dance or a church theater group, or even a science camp, for example, in the 80s and 90s, and those were after-school programs. And what makes them really effective that we have found is firstly when they have qualified staff.
Yeah.
And that's why as the Learning Trust we focus on training and capacitating the practitioners that work in the after-school space, whether those are tutors providing academic support or even facilitators of arts and sports programs or psychosocial support interventions. So it's really about capacitating the people that are going to work with those young people. Secondly, I think, and this works in two ways, I think maybe after-school programs that provide engaging activities to learners, and for the young learner, it might be a diversity of creative activities that they can take part in that can speak to their interests and their passions. But I think something close to what Mary was speaking about is also after-school programs that provide models and interventions that have been proven to work. That empirically we know if we did this maths club intervention or teaching at the right level, we're able to get this result on the other end. So I think engaging activities, but also models and interventions that have been proven to work is a success factor. And lastly, I will say, and the NECT and Mary would love to hear this, that it's also about aligning our efforts to what's happening in the school. And we've been really clear about, after school doesn't exist without schooling. It's not a supplementary service, it's a complementary service, right? And it's about extending learning beyond the classroom. But it has to work hand in hand with the school, whether that means, operating from the school premises or working alongside teachers, finding out where the curriculum gaps are, where the biggest needs are. We find that the most successful after-school programs are those that work closely with the education system, the schools, the districts, and the province.
I think that's been a really incredible answer, not only speaking about what the gap that the sector closes, but also what needs to be true for the sector to be effective. And I heard you talking about, qualified staff, engaging activities, empirical evidence or models based on empirical evidence, but also aligning with the school. Maybe a quick secondary comments, Bongile, before I go to the questions on my app. You probably have a lot of NPOs coming to you as the Learning Trust and seeking your support so that they might be able to get the necessary funding to be a part of the solution in the ecosystem. From what you've observed, what is the glaring gap that might still exist in these NPOs that makes it hard for them to get funding, that makes it hard for them to get the resources that they need to do a clearly very important job?
Yeah, what I would say is that often NPOs don't tailor their approach to corporates especially, or any kind of funder. I think NPOs are so under-resourced that they go hat in hand asking for money without considering necessarily what the corporate needs may be, what the pain points for a corporate like Vodacom might be, or what it is that, are the skills and expertise that exist within Vodacom that can offer those organizations. So I think most critically is for the NPOs in the room to really think about tailoring their approach, getting to know their potential partner, because I think this is a collaboration, this is a joint effort between the funder, the corporate, as well as the NPO. And secondary to that, I think it's also to not be shy about highlighting the mutual benefit for Vodacom associating with a nonprofit that's doing that work. I think it's not about us nonprofits going to ask for money for what we do, but understanding and being able to say, we offer this to your organization, whether that is offering their staff voluntary or volunteering opportunities within the nonprofit organization as well. So I think those two things are most critical. But I also think specifically to really package your pitch well, to offer the corporate or the funder almost a menu of options, right? To be able to say, you can fund this one thing, you can get involved in this little piece that we're doing, or you can send your staff, as I said, to volunteer in our organization. And lastly, I will say for both nonprofits and corporates, I think what's really important is to focus on long-term partnership. I think many corporates in the room probably run or open up, grant applications for 1 year at a time and can't make extended commitments. But I think the nonprofits going into the relationship must have in mind that they want to work with that corporate for the long haul. And I think for the corporate partners as well, if you want to see outcomes, if you want to see change, sustained change that Mary talks about, we have to be in it for the long haul.
And I'm almost hearing a thread from this morning that one of the call to actions is, and I'm going to paraphrase and use the words of David White, who is a poet, and David White says, you have to listen a conversation into existence before you speak it. And what I'm hearing from you as well is the extent to which we're able to listen in those partnerships, to create the space, to bring other voices in. So there's real co-design, real co-creation, and the ability to actually do something special together. But it requires listening from both ends. So let me then turn to my iPad. I've got some really good questions, and the hard ones I'm going to ask in Prof's voice. So you'll have to forgive me on those ones. But there's a question here from Paul, and maybe, Daki, I'll put it to you, and we'll pick it up as well with others on the panel. And the question is, how do we navigate the sometimes difficult terrain of misalignment with government, especially if sometimes that misalignment is due to government's own challenges? So, simply put, how do you make sure that how has Vodacom Foundation ensured that you're aligned with what governments are doing? You speak a lot about the 2030 articulation of the targets as they are in the National Development Plan. And how do you ensure that you stay aligned and that Vodacom doesn't get excited and does its own thing, or the other hand, also staying aligned with government so that they are walking in tandem with you throughout the journey?
Yeah, it is about understanding what each partner or party brings into the relationship. It is not about competition. It is about collaboration, as was mentioned there. So government space is to make policies and to create a conducive environment for civil society and for the private sector to prosper. We as the private sector, Vodacom in particular, when we enter into that partnership or into that relationship, we should know what our parameters are. And government reminds us on a regular basis. Like I said, we are not experts in pedagogy. We are experts in technology. And therefore, we use technology as a tool to deliver education. Where we stray away, government will actually tell us in no uncertain terms. The problem with you people in the private sector is that you always run ahead of yourselves.
Yeah.
And that helps us to reflect and say, what do we bring to the partnership? The schools do not belong to Vodacom.
Yeah.
We adopt those schools. Those schools belong to government. So at no point do we go to a school and introduce a program without talking to government. Yes, there will be frustration because sometimes we've got these bright ideas and we want to implement very fast, and government wants this thing to be done, step by step, and it's taking months for you to agree on how to deliver. But eventually, when you are not competing and you say, we are here to support you, they listen. And then what is the role of civil society? Civil society is there as the eyes and ears for both government and private sector to hold us accountable for the commitments that we make.
So let me be difficult. And Kayisa, I'm going to bring it to you. Oftentimes we will learn, and I'll maybe take the telecom sector as an example, that innovation comes about when we break boundaries of existing policy, as an example, and we discover new ways to do things more efficiently, more faster, more smarter. And so sometimes there's a tension between the desire to move ahead and try new things and to innovate, and the reality that, as Daki is saying, that government will always say, but these are the policy parameters. In your view, how do you get a both and outcome? How do we have a conducive relationship with government, but also tinker and fiddle at the edges in a way that allows us to discover new and better ways of doing things that allow us to play outside of policy? Is that even a possibility in your view?
It is a possibility, and it's needed. We do need to tinker outside the edges, because that's where innovation comes in. However, I think what's key, as Daki has already mentioned, let us touch base with government. It may not necessarily be at a given time when we're ready to be in schools and innovate that they're ready to come with, but at least there's a sort of an agreement that this is something the system needs. We may not necessarily be ready as government with the resources that are necessary to partner with you, but let's co-design what you are going to be doing. Let's both understand, and we will bring the context for you to understand in what way are you going to be implementing this and what are the implications for us as government. So initially, the partnership might not be that you collaborate with them in doing, but it may be that there's at least an agreement that we are going to pilot this because we both agree that we need it for our system. So you can't just trudge ahead and think government needs this or schools need this, even if they're not going to be funding alongside you, but at least there has to be an agreement that it's necessary for the system to go this way. And then you can go ahead and pilot and document your lessons while you're thinking about 5 years or 3 years down the line, how we're going to replicate it in other areas, but they are alongside with you in that process.
And I think that links beautifully to the earlier comment or mini conversation that we had about vanity projects. And Professor Metcalf was saying, yes, we don't want to do vanity projects, but every now and then we can create the space if we know what it is that we intend to learn from that particular project. And so thank you for that insight, because I think it's a beautiful dot connect to earlier. Let me then jump to Sibongile, because I've got a difficult question for you, Principal, because that's my mission today with the principals on the panel. Let me jump to Sibongile first. Sibongile, there's, I think, a really good question from Jacques. And Jacques is saying, everybody is focusing on a piece of the ecosystem in order to make change after school, a range of things from Vodacom's perspective, long-term systemic interventions from the NECT. But Jacques is saying, how can we tackle one issue at a time that's eventually going to lead to a change in South Africa. And I'm hearing in Jacques' word the idea that what is the shared and common vision that we have for education, back to the question from Prof. And if we aligned all our capabilities and our resources around that, could we really change educational outcomes in the country? What are your thoughts on that?
You know, I'm reminded as you asked that question of a report that was done by Zenix, right, Mary, on learning backlogs. And they talk a lot in that report about wicked problems.
Wicked problems.
And I think first and foremost, we have to acknowledge that education in this country is a wicked problem. That the issues that we're dealing with are, you know, quite complex and intractable. And when we do have wicked problems to tackle, we have to have a multiplicity of solutions. And I really love how you're talking about an ecosystem, because I think often when we talk about the education system, it almost connotes that there's this kind of, you know, organized structure that just works. But when we talk about an ecosystem, we are almost acknowledging that there is complexity in what we are dealing with, and that it requires a multiplicity of ways of eating this kind of elephant, right? So I don't think there's any one way, and often at the Learning Trust we speak about working practice instead of best practice, because that's an acknowledgement that there isn't one way.
Yeah.
There isn't the best way to do it. There are multiple ways that we can do it. So I think firstly acknowledging wicked problems. And then secondly, I think, you know, we can't speak about collaboration enough. I think being able to acknowledge that the problem is so big that no one party can really solve it.
Yeah.
I mean, there's, issues about resourcing in the system. That's a big problem. How do we deal with that? And what philanthropy and corporates offer is that there's space for innovation and additional resourcing that can test solutions that might work. Over and over before we hand them over to the system for adoption. But I think we have to be careful in expecting that the system can adopt everything that we've innovated and tested and think works.
Yeah.
So that's why I talk about long-term investment, because it might be that Vodacom has to do what it's doing forever and ever, actually, without the system having to adopt it. So I think those are the things that we have to accept about being part of an ecosystem that is solving wicked problems.
Sure, being a part of an ecosystem that is solving wicked problems. Principal, again, another question from Jacques. And Jacques, thank you. Your questions are absolutely excellent. And Jacques is saying, I hear all of you. I think all of you are saying amazing things. But at the end of the day, or as my husband likes to say, at the end of the day, how do we get these learners from school into jobs? And I put that question to you, Principal, because in your community, you've seen the children that have left your school gates. And I'm certain that in some instances, you've seen those children remain in the community without jobs. If there was one thing that corporates could do to make sure that as they leave your gates, if they're not going into a tertiary institution or similar, that at the very least they're walking through the gates of employment, what do corporates need to do?
Thank you. I think it's a challenge that we're facing. Our education system. Let me speak to, if you were to talk to technical subjects, schools that do technical subjects is something else. Unfortunately, my school does not do that. But you'll have learners who you can see this child, if you were to keep the child up to grade 12, they can't make it. This child must be channeled somehow. But then we find it difficult with parents.
Yeah.
You've got to find a way to sit down with parents, somehow convince them, make them understand that, yes, you want your child to become a doctor,
Yeah.
an engineer, an educator, a nurse, or whatever. But as we teach this child on a daily basis, this is what we see. We can see this child is gifted in drawing, he's gifted in art career. Can we assist in channeling such? Now, the companies, the NGOs that are seated here, they have got career expos that they do. As schools, we appreciate it when they invite us, when they invite our kids, so that learners get to pick those careers early in their time, so that there are careers that you can start immediately after grade 9, which is moving into grade 10.
Yeah.
So with parents, then we're able to say, with the child, this is what we have identified as a gift for a child, and then this is the channel the child can take. So if we have more of such where learners are engaged, and we make them understand, and in terms of career choices, right as they start, so that we don't force them, frustrate them in giving them something that will not benefit them, and companies coming to schools and expose learners to the kind of opportunities that are out there. Learners pick it up from there. They then realize that I don't have to wait until matric.
Yes.
This type of a career that I want to do, after grade 9, I can go to a TVET college and make sure that I move from TVET to this particular institution and begin to work. Some of the things learners can learn as they move to TVET college and get skills that they can use for themselves instead of getting employed. Immediately after TVET, then they have the skill that they can use to create employment for themselves. And those are some of the things that we need to begin to look into. But advocacy to communities, I think it's important, because we have a problem with communities that do not understand the issues of allowing kids to move away from the mainstream to specific institutions that will address certain skills that they need to be able to move into job opportunities as soon as they exit their school-going age.
Principal, I think it's an excellent response, and I'm watching the time, and I want to make sure that, one, I'd like the technical team to pull up the poll, because I'd like for us to reflect on it. But I think what you've said is so important, Principal, and that is the courage to step away from the mainstream. And I think as South Africans, we've known that TVET colleges have received, have almost been seen as not an ideal option coming out of school. And what I'm hearing you say is, if we do the work of community advocacy, we can make real options for young children to really move from their ABCs to CEOs. And I think it's a beautiful link to the second conversation of the morning, which is going to be about entrepreneurship. And that's what you've brought to the table. So in the poll, we asked the question. Let's see if we can bring up the poll and put it up on the big screen as well. We asked a question about where should we focus our interventions in particular. And the number of options that we had there, and there they are, we said we either want to focus on early childhood development, on primary school, on secondary school, on technical and vocational education, or higher education, or the full life cycle. Now, what I'd love to see, team, so I'm seeing here some of the comments, I can see it there, but my eyesight is not great. I'm not seeing the percentages. Can you please pop up the percentages on those options? I hope that we've participated in the poll in the room, so if you haven't seen it, the poll is up there, and there we are. So the percentages are there. I'm going to read them out for my panel, because I know you can't see them. So again, the question is, which stage of the education life cycle should companies prioritize through their CSI initiatives? Almost half of the room, 48%, is saying it's got to be the full life cycle. 36% is saying it's early childhood development. And then the numbers get smaller as they're spread out between primary school, secondary school, technical and vocational education, as well as higher education. So in this final 2 minutes that we have on the clock, I'm going to give each of my panelists 30 seconds to react to that. And Take, I'm going to start off with you. That surely must be a validating result for Vodacom Foundation.
Yes, it means we are on the right track. because, as I said, when we started our program, we were focusing on verticals.
Yeah.
And when we did monitoring and evaluation, it actually showed us that focusing on these individual verticals does not work. You need a comprehensive approach. And because government already had that framework,
Yeah.
we just had to put it into practice. But I want to go back to the question that you asked the principal here about mainstream education
Yes.
and engaging with communities and parents to look at the bigger picture. The reason why we introduced robotics and coding in schools is to basically improve creative thinking, problem solving, and self-awareness. You need to bring out those soft skills
Yeah.
at an early age so that learners are able to determine their paths and their destiny
Yeah.
without being constrained by the traditional way of education. And what we're beginning to see with our robotics and coding program is that learners that had never thought that they were going to go into the STEM subjects because
Yeah.
they were told they did not have the brain for mathematics, they are now saying, I want to do this, I want to do that, but I never thought I could do it.
Sure. And I think again, I love the fact that we are intentionally going into the family structure, locating the conversation within the family structure, and not leaving it to happen in the classroom as well. Families and communities are part of the equation when we look at education. Principal, do you agree? I would imagine we are now at 49% of the full cycle. If you were, let me ask this differently. If you were marking this paper, right? What's the mark you're going to give on that result?
I think I will somehow agree with it's now 50%.
Yeah, it's now 50%.
I think I will go for that. It is important that we don't only focus on a specific groupings at a particular time, rather move with everyone going forward, so that whatever partnership, whatever collaboration, whatever support that comes to educational institutions, learners must not get them somewhere along the way as they move. If they start with these things, they get exposed early in their life, and they get to know exactly this is what I want to do, and they don't have to struggle in terms of where to go from here to the next point.
It's a great answer.
Yeah.
It's the full life cycle at 50%. Principal says he'll give it a definite pass and potentially a good grade as well. The full life cycle at 50%, early childhood at about 36%, Kanyisa, and then a smattering of numbers in the middle. What does that storyline say to you?
It tells me that we still focus on the wrong areas. If we get the education system right at early learning levels, including primary schooling, there should be less remedial work that we should be doing at secondary school, but rather we should be reinforcing so that we can get those distinctions and so on. But right now we are microwaving students. We get them to camps. They don't sleep a few months before they write exams. By the time they get to tertiary, they're exhausted. We have very high levels of dropout rates at tertiary education. Why? Because the microwaving hasn't helped. It has not built in and instilled the foundations of learning that every child needs to have for them to do better at higher education and for them to do better in high school. So in my view, it's not the full cycle. It's get it right at the beginning.
Sure.
And then the rest of the higher learning will be resolved.
I think it's such a powerful analogy. The microwaving is not working. So it's a slow bake is actually what we're looking for with the right ingredients, long-term over time. I'm so grateful that I left school as early as 2022 because it's been such a, now that you're talking about microwaving of learners, it really speaks to the intensity that learners find themselves under. Spugile, you get to take us home. When you look at those numbers, what's the storyline that comes up for you?
Yeah, and Nozipo, I don't have Mary's gift of saying difficult things nicely.
So you're just going to say it.
I'm just going to say it. I think it doesn't help us as donors and the funding community to hoard one space. So I think it's important, yes, to say the foundations need to be laid out in the early grades, like Kanyisa is saying. But if you then throw that really great child into an ill-resourced, badly run primary school in grade 4, they're just going to walk backwards. So I think corporates and donors and everybody needs to invest at the full life cycle of the education value chain, so that we can walk the path with that child to get us to the end. I don't think it helps us for 36% of us to think that we can only invest in ECD and that child will take, will get a matric at the end of that.
Thank you very much. Nasi, a big round of applause for that. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd love to invite you to please give my panel a really, really resounding round of applause. Thank you so very much.